What's up, witches? Welcome back to my channel. I wanted to make a video all about Mars today and also share with you some of my interpretations on what it means when your Mars is in a certain sign. Now, before we get started, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer that all of this is my opinion based on my studies and my research, so take what you like, leave the rest. Astrology is up for interpretation. It's up to you what you want to utilize and what you want to allow to resonate with you. So if anything resonates with you, just keep it, and if it doesn't, pass it along or leave it where it is. And before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps me to allow to continue to create this type of content, which I really like to do for all of you. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. Mars is the masculine planet, and what I mean by that is that it's a very active, outward focused, fixer, energetic, driven, passionate, ready to partake, if you will, type of energy. It's often associated with war, and I like to expand our associations with war out beyond warfare. And what I mean by that is thinking about the elements of what war actually is. It is the ability to take an opposition or to see something as separate from you and to attempt to allow it to evolve and to change in your favor, right? Or potentially in the favor of your side of things. So there's an active recognition of the self in our Mars placement. This is how we want to stand up for ourselves, what we may want to stand up for, how we do that, the lens in which our passion comes through, the lens in which our drive comes through, how we strategize, how we find ourselves in opposition, etc. So of course, these interpretations are going to lack the element of a lens of a house, because I won't be giving a full in-depth each house to every sign in this video, obviously, because that would just take ages. But I do offer astrology readings. If you'd like to get one, see the link below in the description box. But I'll still give my best ability to interpret the Mars placements that I know them in the signs without the houses. So starting right off in the first sign, Aries. Aries is ruled by Mars, so it's a benefic placement, which means it goes hand in hand. It's a comfortable placement, though it is somewhat explosive. So when we take that Mars energy, it can be almost like this equation. We're coupling that area of our personality, of our self, of our character. So we have this activating, passionate, determined, strategizing, masculine, if you will, piece of ourselves being rippling out through this lens of the sign. So when it ripples out through Aries, Aries really captivates that energy and amplifies it. So Aries is acting like a speaker, turned all the way up for Mars. It wants to allow you to be the boots on the ground and the mastermind behind the mission, right? So when you're faced with the task of fixing something, creating something, arguing, when you're faced with the task of executing something, you are probably quick to respond, quick to act. When someone gives you an idea, you might be extra determined to get your idea out there too. You want to be in the mix, and you are in the mix for a reason, for a very mental, headstrong, willful purpose that stands true to you. The shadow of this is that you might be very hard to connect to when you're in that state, meaning that you could be rash and overlook things, because Aries can be kind of impatient. So you might miss a few details, or you might not plan fully ahead. It might be more easy for you to get something up and going, and the follow through could be a little bit more tough. Moving on to our second sign, Taurus. So Mars in Taurus can be somewhat of a hypersensitive placement. I think this could be easily overlooked. Something that maybe astrologers don't always reference is that Taurian energy is very sensitive about its belongings. It wants to beautify the space that it dwells within. And also Taurus has a groundedness and a stillness that can be very, very receptive, though it may not seem like it. That type of stillness and sturdiness and stableness is so aware to the even, most acute and from, you know what I'm saying. Anything that could possibly kind of disturb that thing, they're very aware of it. So when we have that Mars energy in there, it's almost like they are so hyper aware of when something is going to disturb their idea of peace or their idea of groundedness, stableness, and sturdiness. There could be soft spots around belongings or soft spots around feeling like disturbed or pushed or swayed out of their ideals and opinions. Challenges are going to be met with extra stubbornness at times when it comes to a Taurian Mars. And depending on the house placement, this could show up in super various aspects. Like, for example, let's say it's in the 4th house. This could really amplify those qualities in spaces that involve your mother or your home or your sense of your nest. Whereas if it's in the 12th house, it could be like you're always being challenged about your ideals and you need to stand up for your sense of peace and sensitivity, and you might struggle with this implosiveness and this empathicness where your anger is stifled from ever coming into the exterior realm, right? And again, I'm talking about if we put this through different houses, it can give it a total different flavor, but the fundamental base root of this placement, Mars in Taurus, is ultimately very headstrong, very available to take into accountability everything that could possibly be challenging their standpoint. And they're extra sensitive in the areas of, yeah, like I said, belongings and what they consider to be safe and stable. They don't want anything to challenge those things or to try to take those things away from them. Now, Mars in Gemini is a very special placement. The tarot card associated with this placement is actually the 9 of Swords. And I like to bring that up because Mars can be somewhat cruel in spaces like Gemini and when I say cruel, I don't mean physically, I mean mentally, because Gemini is the philosopher. It wants to think its way through life. It wants to consider and weigh and calculate and receive the information. Gemini rules the nervous system. So it's like the nervous system is receiving every piece of external stimuli, all 5 senses, processing it and allowing your body to calibrate, right? It's the messenger. It's taking it all in, processing, okay, heat up your temperature, go to sleep. Like it tells you kind of what to do through its ability to intake information. Now, when you put Mars, this very activating planet, in Gemini, it creates this like hyper drive thought process that can be somewhat looping, and it can almost be like you're not going to solve any of these problems without action and only thinking. So it can be a very well, how do I say this? It can lead to a lot of negative self-talk. It can be something that we struggle with, or really diving in and identifying with our beliefs and letting those beliefs somewhat destroy us. And I want to be very careful with that language, because it's not that our actual beliefs are harmful or what we're believing is the problem. It's more of the self-talk we use and the lack of compassion or the lack of ability to let that processing happen at its own timing without our instruction on how long it should take or how we should be feeling at this time. So Mars and Gemini people, my heart goes out to you. And anytime you're struggling with anxiety, remember to take yourself out of the mental and back into the physical. It's time to do simple action, one thing at a time, one day at a time. No grand scheme, crazy things need to be bothering you. Simplify it no matter what. Come back to the heart and allow yourself to just receive, take it in, and bear witness to the self with as much love and compassion as you can, because that action is going to help you to keep time going and to keep action moving one step at a time until those little bouts of like, whoa, like kind of obsessive or like obsessive compulsive tendencies can be pushing you around, and grounding down and simplifying that can be very useful for that placement. But it's not all bad. These people are very quick-witted, logical, available to see their way through very heady situations that might require a creative thought process. They're very good at group activities and taking everything into consideration about what everybody's saying and then coming out with a conclusion, as long as it's not an inward anxious battle of self and it's directed onto their peers. It can be really useful so long as there's compassion again. Next we have Mars in Cancer, and Mars in Cancer is a very interesting placement, I would say, because we have the very masculine, outward-focused Mars in the sign of Cancer, which is a very maternal, psychic, intrinsic, fluid, yet deeply empathic, hypersensitive, psychic, kind of moody area. So we have a very feminine and a very masculine coming together and merging. Now, this can be, in its brightest of terms, a fulfilling state because we're willing to take actions on our feelings. Now, if our feelings are aligned and aren't thought out all the way, it can also be kind of explosive. And when I say explosive, I mean explosive as in like, we might be taking things in, little things are getting to us, we're not really saying much, it comes out in little passive aggressive mannerisms that we might have, and then we suddenly do lash out, or suddenly something builds up to be all too much, or maybe we're mad for no particular reason at all, except for this thing that happened like yesterday, and it was in passing, so we're not even sure if it happened, we're just pretty empathic, we're pretty sure that's what that person was thinking. Like, it can be like that, you know what I mean? And the passive aggressiveness, I think, kind of encompasses like Cancer and Mars together. Now, it's not all bad, of course, because again, whenever we are feeling something deeply, we're willing to, hopefully, if we've developed the coping mechanism of clearly speaking, communicating, and compassion, we're able to actually fight for others. We're very loyal, defensive creatures in this placement. We want the best for all of us emotionally, so that placement can be a very good intended yet challenging placement to have. And by the way, if you're wondering where my Mars placement is that it's in Aries and in the 12th house. Woo! Okay, we're just gonna glide right over that. Moving on, when we go to Mars in Leo, we have the tarot card that is Seven of Wands is associated with this placement. I think that's useful to take into consideration because in the traditional symbology of the Seven of Wands, we have a figure who is standing above everyone else with a stick, kind of like jabbing them out of the way. And meeting criticism and meeting what is trying to challenge them or tear them down with their own magic, their own weaponry, their weapon of choice, their personal grounding tactics. So it's a very egocentric placement to have. It can be very like, you know, I know what's right, I know what my heart says, I'm willing to follow that with absolute determination, passion, valor, all those things. There's a lot of confidence there, but that doesn't mean that challenges won't arise. So this placement can be prone to having to steer the group. They're here to really not so much listen and be so empathic. They're more here to say, okay, listen up, I have a great idea, I'm coming from a heart-filled, passionate, fiery, ignited way. See me, like, you know, and then follow me. And that kind of sums it up, I think, but it doesn't always have to be so extreme. Again, looking at the houses can help, but that is the very just outward, obvious way to explain it, I would say. Now, the challenge of this can be that sometimes they are wanting that outcome, so they might sway off of their own beliefs so that they can be a people pleaser, right? So that they can be heart connected to everybody. So as long as they're not falling into the wrong groups, as long as they're not trying to please certain people and they're following their own personal incentives and doing what they believe is right, they tend to be great leaders. Mars in Virgo is a very practical, logical, tactful, and patient placement. It can be very parental, if you will, as in it wants to oversee, it wants to double check work, it would like to be the logic mastermind behind the project. And it does a great job at being very realistic when it comes to handling problems. It might need a few days to process things. It's very based in reality. Again, with Virgo, it wants things done right. You know, that archetype of the virgin, I always like to think that virgin and purity need brand new definitions. They're not associated with sex at all. Oh my God. They're way more about the ability to approach something for the first time with a lot of honor, integrity, and hopefulness that it will go as great as it can, right? And doing something for the first time or approaching something with this beginner's mind for Mars Virgo means being as prepared as possible, being able to apply their logic, apply their tools, perfect their craft is all very important to them. They want to get it right, you know, and this allows them to have this gift of compassion and patience for all that are involved in the process. They tend to be more hard on themselves than they are on anybody else. And ultimately, this sign is a super useful team player. They tend to be, you know, logical, not so much of a challenger. But the shadow of it is that they could be very nitpicky. They could get kind of wound up. They could be so patient that it becomes a delayed process because they might not be perfectly aligned with, you know, the outcome of the action they're taking. They might think they're doing a great job, but, you know, humans, they tend to sometimes not be perfect emanations or manifestations of these energies. So if you take a Mars Virgo and you're thinking they're going to do a perfect job, they're going to do it perfect to the best of their ability. And it's just good to keep that in mind because we're all human beings. So anyway, moving on. Mars in Libra can be a very interesting placement. Again, we have this Venusian sign, Libra, of balance and beauty and justice, all in the sign of Mars. So there's an intense need to keep things balanced and perfect and beautiful. And that can be all great. So these people might be awesome at keeping balance in certain areas. Let's say they are having some feelings inside that are very intense and expressive. They may not want to break the peace, so they tend to be very peacekeeping, and that can lead to a lot of pent-up energy in its shadow. Moving along to Mars and Scorpio. Mars and Scorpio can definitely be a very tactful placement, as Scorpio is co-ruled by Mars and Pluto, but in that way there can be a lot of like darker thoughts. There could be a willingness to take action in places that other people aren't willing to take action. There could be a theme of exploring sexuality, healing wounding around sexuality when it comes to the Mars and Scorpio placement. We could have a lot of secretiveness that surrounds tough times with others or when we're dealing with things. There's a lot of hidden parts of ourselves that we may not feel fully safe expressing, so it can be kind of a tough placement because there's a lot of deep waters, and by deep waters I mean intense emotions and experiences that may not feel totally safe out on the battlefield, if you will. So then we may end up taking alternative routes through things or being into niche things that we aren't totally, again, wanting to express and be outward with. So it can be somewhat implosive for us in arguments or in times where we're having to debate, because we are taking on a lot of extra empathic emotions in those times, though we may seem cool, calm, collected, and somewhat vengeful and hot in our way of dealing with things. You know what I'm saying? As in, these people can have like just the right thing to say, or they could also be a great silent treatment giver, if you will. Moving along to Mars and Sagittarius. Mars and Sagittarius might try to solve its problems with a geographical escape, if you will. It might want to just get out of the situation. It might want to do something chaotic and crazy to solve a problem, but also it might really take a liking to solving the problem and just go right on through it. It wants to push, it wants to keep the fire going. It's going to do it in a wild way, in a chaotic way, in a loud way. Yeah, this fire sign does pretty well in the Mars planet, I would say, for itself, though with others it could be like blowing like people's hair back a little bit in its way. So this person is a great go get 'em energy bringer, and it wants to achieve things based on what it's interested in. So if it has a goal that it's focused on and that goal is of high priority to them, they're going to get it done in the most exciting, ecstatic way that they possibly can. But they could also struggle with a little bit of chaos along the way. These people just do great overall in the realms of which that they're passionate, and they're able to explore many avenues within. Mars in Capricorn is a very determined, structured leader of sorts. It also can be kind of a worker bee placement. It wants to climb to the top. It wants to do things the best. It wants to get it done. Not that it's competitive per se, but when it does have a fixed goal or it's in a conversation that is getting heated, it will use very real context pieces to get to the end of that thing. So what I mean by that is they have hard facts, hard evidence. They will refer to things that everyone can see and that is very obvious. So they're great at just dealing with what's exactly here, which is kind of hard to argue with, you know, like if someone was to come at that energy with a sideways attitude, they're not really going to give it the time. They're just going to come at it with a hard fact that can kind of dead end it right there. Now, when it's solving problems, it might take a little bit more time because it wants to really make sure that everything is real. It's going to double check things. It's not very intuitive in the way it deals with things. It's more like, here's what I know. Here's the tools I have. I'm applying it. I'm going to take my time and go one step of the way, one step at a time to get to the end so that I know when I get there, it's true, it's factual, etc. Mars and Aquarius can be a very mental game type of thing. It's very focused on what everyone has to say. It can be a little bit like pulled in multiple directions. So when things arise, it might not take a strong standpoint. It's more likely to maybe go into one of its niche interests and kind of like be like, I don't really want to do all that. But when it is driven, it tends to be something that's good for the whole or the collective or the community. It wants to find structures that allow it to move up, that comes from support from the outer realms, if you will. And it's a very logical, disconnected, unattached, personally type of thing. So if you get into an argument with a Mars Aquarius, they might say some stuff that almost sits around as like they don't even know or care about you, but you thought loved them. Like you thought you were super connected. Like it can be kind of like, whoa, where did that unattachedness come from? But Aquarius is ruled by air, which is ruler of the swords in the tarot, which can be very quick-witted, logical, analytical. I'm not going to apply my feelings to this exact situation. And then moving to our last one, Mars in Pisces can be a very implosive sign. It can be a very hypersensitive, escape artist type of placement. So when problems arise, they might actually just disassociate or go somewhere else or find a way to escape. This can result in addiction or conversations leading into very emotional territories. But also the sensitivity is super heightened, and they're willing to take their time and dedicate themselves to their spirit, spiritual interests, etc. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. Let me know what sign you are, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!